and after receiving appropriate assurances.
Well, now to the continuing terrorist threat and the killing of another American. That brave rescue mission was not able to try and prevent the cold-blooded execution of American photojournalist Luke Summers by al-Qaeda in Yemen. That attempt coming as President Obama has nominated Pentagon veteran Ashton Carter to become the next Secretary of Defense, replacing Chuck Hagel. So will Carter's approach to battling the radical Islamic terrorists like al-Qaeda and ISIS finally potentially lead to their defeat? Joining us now, as always, is former U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, John Bolton, Senior Fellow at the American Enterprise Institute and a Fox News contributor. Ambassador, you know, Luke Summers' killing and that of his fellow hostage from South Africa was just so sad and tragic. Can we stop these terrorists from taking American hostages? These are people who go there to help, like Peter Kasich, and instead they get beheaded or shot.
Well, I think the only way to stop the hostage-taking is to destroy the terrorist threat, to recognize that we're facing an ideological problem in many countries around the world. It doesn't have a corporate hierarchy in terms of structure, but it does share the same radically anti-Western, anti-American in particular ideology. And unless we're committed to a global strategy to defeat it, I'm afraid that this kind of tragedy will simply continue to play itself out, and perhaps in a larger measure if the terrorists get their hands on weapons of mass destruction, which has been an al-Qaeda objective these last 20 years.
Do you believe we are sufficiently committed to that battle and that fight right now?
I absolutely do not. I think the president still believes that the war on terror is over. He's focused on eliminating top al-Qaeda leadership in Waziristan and along the Afghan-Pakistan border. That obviously remains a problem, but it is not the only problem. And these days, it is far from the central problem, as the continuing successes of ISIS in what used to be Syria and Iraq continues. But look around. The beheadings in Syria by ISIS, now we see it in Yemen. We've seen it in Algeria by other terrorist groups. The activities of Boko Haram in Nigeria and northern Africa. All around the region, these terrorist barbaric acts continue, and the countries of the region don't seem to know how to respond to it, and they look for American leadership, and the president is otherwise occupied.
Well, you know, it seems that Ash Carter will have this as #1 on his plate, but his experience is, he's 60 years old, a Rhodes Scholar, went to Yale, like you, but his experience seems to be basically with nuclear arms, even though he was the #2 Deputy Pentagon Secretary under Leon Panetta recently. Is he the man for the job to take on Islamic radical terrorism?
Well, I'm not sure there's anybody in this administration who could be said to have that qualification, and it's not because of Ash Carter's experience with nuclear weapons rather than terrorism. You could put the best counterinsurgency professionals in the world in as Secretary of Defense. It's not fundamentally going to change the Obama administration's approach. And I think what Carter has in store for him is, at best, 2 years of frustration.
Well, you talk about frustration. Look, some of his predecessors have complained about what they call micromanaging and the frustration of the White House inner circle. You know, they're talking basically about, I would assume, Valerie Jarrett and Susan Rice dictating Pentagon strategy. Take a look at what former Defense Secretary Robert Gates said just last month when he complained about what he called the micromanaging by the White House. Listen.
I told the commanders, you get a call from the White House, you tell them to go to hell and call me.
That is pretty stunning. Ambassador, you've been at these highest levels. What does that mean?
Well, I think it proves Gates's point and Panetta's that there's been extraordinary micromanagement. And, you know, the White House is sensitive to the criticisms politically, but not in governance terms. So in the past several days, you've seen a lot of spin about how Carter will speak his mind. I'm sure other defense secretaries, all three former defense secretaries, spoke their minds as well. It just doesn't make any difference with this White House. I think we're seeing optics and spin here, not any fundamental change. And I think that's why Carter's going to find it very difficult, if indeed his opinions are contrary to the White House, to have any prospect of changing the minds at the top.
Well, maybe they'll be asking some of those questions of him during his confirmation hearings. Ambassador John Bolton, always good to see you. Thank you for joining us on Sundays.
Thank you, Eric.